Hello, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible, Hope and Healing with Mike and Lillie podcast. We want to thank you for joining us. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support for those suffering from addiction. Hey everybody, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible, Hope and Healing with Mike and Lillie podcast. And tonight, I'm going to be talking to Lillie about a book that she has read. And the book is called Influencer, The New Science of Leading Change by Joseph Grenny and his colleagues. And Lillie's going to talk about this. This is a book that she's read. Now, I know what you're going to think. You're going to think, this is kind of a business book. But the concept that she pulled out of this book has a lot of application to recovery. And when she told me about this, I thought, hey, this is something that we need to talk about with people because it really has direct application, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it. And so with that, Lillie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Mike. So just like Mike was saying that I had read this book several years ago, and the past few weeks we've been talking about early recovery and why meetings are important and why it's important to have the whole family involved, having a support group, a support network. And so Mike and I were in the car one day and I thought, wow, I really see how this book has a lot of application to the recovery world. And so I said, I would love to share this with everyone. And so we talked about it earlier yesterday, and he said, well, let's do a podcast on it. So I thought that's a great idea. So here we are. And so I know that we're on podcast. Obviously, you can't see us. And so I want you to use your mind's eye and just think about a table. And think of a table with 2 columns and 3 rows. And at the top, the first 2 columns are going to have motivation. That's the first column. And then the second column has ability. So you have a motivation and then ability. And then under the rows, think of 3 rows and think of personal, social, and then I say environment. The book talks about structure, but I want you to think about the environment. So that's what makes up the rows and the columns. But in each of those, there's going to be 6 boxes. So I'm going to be talking about personal motivation, personal ability, social motivation, social ability, environmental motivation, and then the environmental ability. So let me walk through, and I'm going to translate on how does that translate to you and your recovery and the importance of meetings and all of that. So let's tackle personal motivation. So before I go into that, so the way the book was written, it was really written by a bunch of researchers looking at companies or tribes or communities on if 4 out of the 6, what they called sources of influence were tapped into, then your probability of success increased by 10-fold. So who wouldn't want to have change in their life or change in an organization and increase your probability by 10-fold? So then we're talking about your recovery, our recovery, on how do we want to ensure the most success for ourselves. So let's talk about the first one, personal motivation. And in your recovery, are you personally motivated? If you, like Mike and I were saying, if you don't want to get well, if you're not at that point, whether you've reached your rock bottom or it's near the bottom that you want to be at, if you're not motivated to get better, you're not going to get better, right? You have to have that personal motivation to want to get better. And then on top of that, then let's look at personal ability. Now, when you first get into the program, you may not know what to do, right? The alcohol or the drug is messing up with your brain. It's hijacked you, and so you're not even thinking straight. So you may or may not have that ability. But like in Mike's case, after years and years and years of being in in the circles of AA, having gone through a couple of treatment centers, 5, detox centers, he knew what he needed to do. He had that personal ability. And so we're all different walks of life in terms of your motivation as well as your ability. So let's move over to the social aspect. Where does your social motivation come from? Those are your peers. Well, that's your social network. That's your sponsor. Those are the people that you go to meetings with, whether it's an AA or Al-Anon, an R-Anon. Those are the sponsors and the people that you work alongside of or are supported by in your recovery. And then social ability. Well, a sponsor, your peers, if they've been in the program, can impart their experience, strength, and hope in terms of you socially, correct? And then the final two is the environment. The environment, how does the environment motivate you as well as give you the ability? That's the entire Al-Anon AA network, right? They put up in our area up to 300 meetings per day. And then they host all these things, whether it's annual events, these special events that you have through AA or Al-Anon, right? That go extend beyond the meetings. That's that environment that's there to support you. So when we talk about why is it important, like during COVID, you may have been personally motivated, personally had the ability, but then you lost access to people because we were isolated. We lost going to meetings. You may or may not been in touch with your sponsor, and you didn't have that social aspect. So you were really kind of on your own. So I was telling Michael, it's not surprising that a lot of people relapse after 20 plus years because they lost 4 out of the 6 areas that would influence you to change your behavior. And so I think there's just a lot of application. And I was telling Michael, it goes beyond recovery. Like I was telling him the story where last September, we talked to our daughter that we were going to do a half marathon together. Mike and I were going to be involved. And so I certainly knew I had the personal motivation and the personal ability. I had done a couple of marathons at that point, multiple half marathons, but I noticed that, for me to have to train on my own, it was going to be difficult. So what did I do? I joined a running club. It was a local club in this area. And so what did I do? I ran with other people who are doing different races. We would be encouraging each other. And then of course we had a coach that was from the running store itself. And she was providing snacks and goos. And then she also had this wonderful face towels that were dipped in cold ice water. So when you were done with your run, she would hand that over to you. And so I successfully prepared. Took about a couple of months for me to prepare for the half marathon, knowing that we were going to fly to Ohio to run with my daughter. And so for me, knowing that I was increasing my probability of success, that I was able to successfully do that run. So it could be whether it's a running club or it could be whether it's yoga or losing weight. If you think about how can I ensure my success, think of anything that you want to change and have lasting change. If you could have at least 4 out of those 6, better yet, do all 6, and you will increase your probability of success for change. So Mike, what do you think about that? I remember your initial reaction to that, but how does that apply to all the couple of weeks that we've been talking about early recovery?
Oh, I think it's absolutely true. And this is why a couple of points here. Number one, people that relapse over and over and over. And where I work in the detox unit, we have patients that come in like not once or twice or 3 times. I mean, dozens of times into the treatment center. And one of the things that I have noticed that people that get into long-term sobriety tend to do the same things. Now, it doesn't mean that their recovery looks exactly alike. People are people and there's different motivations and there's different goals. But they tend to do certain things. And the things that you're mentioning here, the personal, social, and environmental, they are addressing all of those needs. Now, on the other hand, the people that are not getting well, the people that are not getting into long-term recovery are also doing the same things. And what are they doing? They're not doing, I should say, the things that you're talking about. They're isolating. They don't have the social network. They aren't going to meetings. They aren't reading the literature. They don't have a sponsor. They don't have all of the things that you're talking about. So the reason why this whole concept that when you brought it up resonated with me is because I see it every day. Now you can look at my recovery and other, people that you and I both know that are in recovery. They are doing the things that you're talking about. And when you see somebody that relapses, I can tell you from experience, you see that relapse coming a mile away. In fact, I can talk to somebody now in a meeting and within about 5 minutes know that they are working towards a relapse. We always say in recovery, you're either working towards a recovery or you're working towards a relapse, but nothing is ever stagnant. I mean, if you think about it, your body, right? Just take your body and your health. Think about this. Every single day, your body is either getting better or it's getting worse. Your health is getting better or it's getting worse. You are never in a state of homeostasis. You're always getting better or getting worse. Our recovery is the same way. It's getting better or it's getting worse. And when you take one of those elements away, then, and certainly a second element away, you're headed towards disaster. And I think the problem that we had during COVID was the fact that some of this was forced upon people in recovery. It wasn't your fault. It was just taken away. But I think it demonstrated the value. I think we had sort of a master class in what happens when we take an element of support away. And actually it was more than one element. It was the meetings themselves, and then it was the fellowship. So there was really the social, environmental part of it. But that's kind of how I look at it. And I'm telling you that even though I know this book that you read is designed more for like business people, it really, and remember, we can take aspects of our lives, our community, and our work, and the principles. A principle that works in another area of your life may also be directly applicable to recovery. They're not mutually exclusive.
Well, and I agree. So if you were to Google and do a search of this concept, this was the first time I had heard about it through this book, but there are examples of individuals that used it to lose weight. Let's say, for example, you want to lose weight, but then in your household, everyone's buying, snacks and cookies. And so socially, the people that are in you, who are in your inner circles are pressuring you to eat sweets and not be healthy. But at the same time, if you're not buying your food, someone else is buying it for you, then even environmentally, you've got to go out on your own to be able to buy stuff, because all the pantries and the refrigerator stocked with just bad stuff, right? So it is so easy to apply this concept between your own personal, those around you, and structurally and environmentally, right? It doesn't just apply to a company. It applies to us as individuals. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are leaving treatment and you're going home to a house where everybody's using and your spouse is drinking, let's say, I'm not saying that you can't get well. I mean, just like the example that you had, can you live in a house where people just eat garbage all the time, but yet still be mindful of your own health? Absolutely. Absolutely you can. But it takes a tremendous amount of willpower. It's harder. If you're around people that never work out, they never get out of the house, they just sit around and watch TV and play video games all day, and you get to the point where, okay, I'm going to train for a marathon or an Ironman triathlon, and you want to put an extraordinary amount of training in, it's kind of hard to do. I mean, it's more difficult to do that when you're in a household of people that are just eating garbage and not working out and always trying to suck the time away from you when you have this goal to get well. So like we talked about in the last episode of this podcast, where we talk about families that are, you can either support your loved one's recovery or you can be a detriment to your loved one's recovery. But the bottom line is that you are really stacking the odds against that person, particularly in early recovery, when their brain is, everything in their brain is telling them, you got to go back and use, right?
And that's why it is very important to have all kinds of support mechanisms in place while you're in early recovery, because your brain is fighting against you. And that's true of food. That's true of working out. That's true of all of these things. But that's why. But it's something that we have to be conscious of. And so when people say, "Well, Mike, do I need to go to intensive outpatient treatment? Do I need to go to a residential treatment program?" Only you can make that decision. Nobody's going to make you do anything. But before you make that decision, I want you to think long and hard about what we're talking about here, because that's one of the benefits to going into inpatient treatment is everything that is there will be geared towards supporting your recovery.
Yeah. So, Mike, I remember early on that even when you were struggling in your recovery, right? So personal motivation, personal ability, right? When you were struggling and just starting to get educated, but then I remember you had told me, wow, I'm so thankful that you were in Al-Anon. Me providing that social aspect, I was still getting assistance through Al-Anon and all the principles that I was learning there through that environment. And so I remember you were saying, hey, because I knew about the program, we say in the program in Al-Anon that we can enable behavior, but we can also help our loved one by helping ourselves. So even though you were never in recovery, I was doing a lot myself that was not enabling you. So it was actually encouraging you to get better. So now that you're better, you've got your program, I've got my program, you're a counselor now, right? And a therapist. And so now I would say 6 out of the 6 are being covered for you. And so it's not surprising to me that even though it's a disease and there's no cure, you're doing a lot of things to increase your probability of success by a whole lot.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, is really increasing every chance you have of getting well. And then it's a lot of work on top of that. By the way, I'm not trying to make this sound depressing in early recovery, because let me just kind of paint this picture here. Recovery is profoundly difficult, but profoundly simple at the same time. Now, I know that sounds really weird to put it that way, but it's both easy and hard at the same time. Because after all, Lillie, what's the goal of recovery? If I'm in recovery for alcohol, what's the goal? Pretty simple. To not drink, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, not drink. Sounds simple. Do not put a drink in your mouth. That sounds so simple. We have degree programs. I have one of my college degrees is to teach you to not do one thing, and that's put a drink or drug in your body. That's it. Whole degree, master's degree about it. Books have been written about it. Movies have been written about it. Like libraries of books have been written about it. There's podcasts. This podcast is about this. To do this one simple thing. So why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to do this simple thing? And my answer to that is because we make it difficult. I have found over and over with the patients that I work with, and they ask me all the time, why is it that I keep relapsing and I don't get well? And my answer to them is, it's not because you don't know what to do. You do know what to do. You are just don't put a drink or drug into your body. But they have convinced themselves that it's all of these external factors that are the reason why they drink and drug, as opposed to the simple answer is you have the disease of addiction. And I think that's what it is. They just don't accept that, okay? But they don't. This is a medical issue with a social solution to it. And it is accepting that you have that disease of addiction and it's not going to go away. It's primary, chronic, progressive, deadly. It is a primary diagnosed issue. It's a disease that is of the mind and the body. But how we solve this and how we put it into remission is the things that you're talking about: personal, social, environmental issues. But starting with the realization in the acceptance. In fact, the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, has a whole chapter called Acceptance is the Answer. Accepting that I have this disease, it's not going away, and under no circumstances can I put a drink or drug in my body, mood-altering substance in my body. But then, because ultimately when we do that, we want to escape. We like that numbing feeling. We like that escaping from whatever it is that's causing us. So it's not like death and destruction and divorce and coworkers we don't like, bosses we don't like. It's not that they don't affect us, they do. But our solution to that is to check out by using. And so what you're talking about here is by surrounding yourself with all these other mechanisms, you give yourself a greater chance to not go back to that which is killing you.
Well, I would agree that it's simple, right? Acceptance is the answer. Don't pick up the drink. Right, but we also don't want to oversimplify it in that it's simple, but it's definitely not easy, right? Like you were saying before, it takes 5 years for your body to really go through all the steps of getting long-term recovery. And I think you had said a couple of weeks ago that really until year 2, are you really considered long-term recovery? And so
actually the medical definition of long-term recovery is 5 years.
Okay, so 5 years. So when you consider that simple, never easy, the body needs time to be able to heal. It's a disease that's not just physical. There's an emotional component. There's a psychological component. There's a physical component. There's a spiritual component. And if you're so used to, I would always accuse Mike of having his growth stunted, right? And not just in a physical sense, right? But then because you were so, you started drinking at such a young age, you grew most of your formative years using alcohol as a means to self-medicate yourself. So you didn't even know how to function without alcohol. So how do you reverse yourself, learn new skills to live without alcohol? And especially when you're hooked on it in your formative years, that's a lot of things that you have to learn. Simple, not easy.
Yeah. And I'm not judging because I was certainly one of those that took many, many years to get into recovery. And I always point that out to patients too, that, don't think what I'm saying here, I'm not judging you because, for some of the patients I've been in treatment more times than they have. But what it did was show me, and how I finally got sober was what I just said. And that was, I had the benefit that I had a counselor at some point, somewhere along that journey. I had that one counselor that said, hey, this is a disease, and let me show it to you. And he went on a whiteboard and actually showed how this was a medical disease. And that was really the first time that I had heard that. I mean, all of us have heard at some point, like, hey, you know why you drink? You don't love your wife enough. You know why you drink? You don't want to spend time with the kids. You know why you drink? You don't like your boss. You don't go to the gym enough. And all these different reasons as to why we drink and drug. And that never made any sense to me because I was going to church. I do love my wife. I do love my kids. In fact, I wanted to stop, but I couldn't stop. So I didn't really understand what that was all about. Well, interestingly enough, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous refers to what we have. Our relationship to alcohol is like having an allergy. And you might think, well, an allergy, that doesn't make any sense. Actually, it does, because Webster's definition of an allergy is your body having an abnormal reaction to a substance. And so to put it into an example, right, into an example that we have, imagine I start having sneezing fits. Here in Virginia when things bloom, I'm sneezing and I have snot coming out of every orifice of my body when things start to bloom. And you say to me, hey, you know why you're sneezing like that? You don't love your wife. You don't go to church enough. You don't go to the gym enough. All those different things that we hear. And I say to you, what does one have to do with the other? And you say, or I say, absolutely nothing. They have nothing to do with the other. Just like this. Me having a bad boss that I don't like has nothing to do with me drinking. I have an abnormal reaction. My body processes alcohol differently than other people in the neighborhood. So that's the acceptance part, just accepting that that's the way it was. So that made sense to me. But we have causes and conditions, right? Causes and conditions. So my condition is I have this disease. This condition means that I want to check out. I want to isolate. I want to not be present. But the cause are all these other social functions. Now, what you're talking about in this book and in this whole discussion tonight is once we've gotten detox, and that's the purpose of detox, to get you safely titrated down so you don't have a stroke, seizure, or heart attack. You don't die in the process of detoxing, because many of you may not realize this, but detoxing, particularly from alcohol, is extremely dangerous, But our unit and what we do, or any detox unit for that matter, is to get you safely detoxed to where your body is not physically dependent upon that substance anymore. Then the real work begins, because remember, it's mind and body. So we work on the body when you're in a room. Now what we're going to do is work on the mind, because it's the mind that will take you back out. If I was to go relapse tonight, if I was to go out and drink tonight, it would be the breakdown of my mind. My body has long been detoxed. My neural pathways, my body has healed from addiction. My body has. So, but why do people go out after years? Like during COVID, why did we have people with decades of sobriety go back out? It was a breakdown in the mind. That's what it was. And that's what you're talking about here.
Well, Mike, when you say the body is healed, however, you still have the allergy. So I wouldn't say the body is completely healed.
No. I'm talking about the neural pathways and getting the GABA up and B-level series of vitamins and the minerals. That part, the damage that has been done to the body has been healed. What you're talking about is the genetic makeup, because there's a definite genetic predisposition towards alcoholism. Meaning, let's just take alcohol, for example. Alcohol is not processed the same way in my body as it is in non-alcoholic. It just isn't. The enzymes are different, and you have no control over that. That's genetic. And we know there's lots of peer-reviewed studies out there that show genetic predispositions with people from certain genetic backgrounds, of which I definitely, and I've talked about it in other episodes, I definitely have the genetic makeup. That's not something that's going to be healed, because it's genetic. That's why if you're an addict, you're always going to be an addict, because that's not changing. I'm talking about the damage, the liver damage, the brain damage, the neuropathic
just like I have eczema. I will always have eczema, whether or not.
But I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So so my allergies are I have eczema. So I have very sensitive skin, and even though I may apply medication to it and appear as being healed, I'll get it again, correct? Or if you have a peanut allergy or those kind of things. I mean, so I think that was one of the things that you and I both had to realize and accept, like you said, it's a disease, is that you will forever be allergic to alcohol. So Mike and I celebrated our 36th anniversary. We went and we decided to go out yesterday for dinner. And so we went to the restaurant and we basically put in our whenever you go through and you make the reservation, we said, I just put in there, we have an allergy towards alcohol. So when we showed up, the guy said, "Oh, you're allergic to alcohol?" "Yes." "Okay, I won't serve you any."
And he looks at me, he goes, "You're allergic to alcohol?" And I said, "Yes." Now, it's interesting, though. This is the same restaurant we went to last year. We had the same exact waiter, and we made the same exact request. And every time he came to the table, he's like, "You're allergic to alcohol?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And I just like the look on his face. You get a laugh out of it after a while when you're in recovery. In early recovery, I think it makes you very self-conscious, but now you just kind of find it funny. And if anybody questions me, it's like, just trust me. It's in your best interest that I don't drink alcohol. There's not enough alcohol in this restaurant to keep me happy. It's just best I don't start. And then they usually don't ask any more questions after that. But you actually do run into a lot of people that understand that. I mean, listen, a lot of restaurants run into this. A lot of waiters run into this, and they usually know what what that's all about, and they don't pressure you over it. But yeah, it always is kind of comical to see the reaction. It's like, that must suck. You have an allergy to alcohol. Yeah, I do. Yeah. This kid over here, he's got allergic to peanuts, and I'm allergic to alcohol. That sucks. But it is what it is. But I really like this concept that you have, and I think that it makes total sense. And that's why, those of you that are out there and that are struggling, just remember, going to an AA meeting is not all there is. That's not working the program. Owning a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not working the program. You also have to read it. You can't just own it. You have to read it. You're not going to get it by osmosis.
And you want to apply it.
Yeah. And you know what? And the thing is that a lot of people that come to me, a lot of the guys that come into meetings with me, they really like the social aspect of it. Because you've been to AA meetings, Lillie. They can be fun. We laugh.
The speaker meetings.
We laugh, we have a good time, and there's good people. You meet some great people. Most of my close friends right now are in AA meetings, and that's a great thing. It can also be a downside, too, because people then will come in, and they just love the social aspect of it. They look, I have a text group with my home group meeting, and we always, we don't always talk about alcohol. Sometimes, people will see something funny, and they'll send a video, or they'll call and just chat, and that's great. But just going there for the social aspect is not working the program. All of this goes together. It's the literature, it's the meetings, it's the fellowship, it's working with others. But it kind of fits in line with what you're talking about here. It's all of that together. No singular piece is working the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the idea, right? 6 sources of influence. If you tap into all 6, increase your probability of success by tenfold, right? Because like you were saying, it's not just the social aspects, not just going to meetings, but you need to be working your own program, right? Mm-hmm. Because when no one's there and it's just you and your thoughts, what are you thinking about? And so even with, even in my program, right? We have our own literature. We can have sponsors. We could go to meetings. And so if you have a loved one that is not in recovery, then you yourself need to take care of yourself. Personally, have a network, socially, and then go to meetings yourself, right? And get that support that you need, because it can make a difference. It doesn't guarantee that your loved one is going to go into recovery, but you certainly yourself are going to be in a much better position to be able to help that other person if you're taking care of yourself. So it's the whole concept, right? The airplane, the mask comes down, you put it on yourself first before you help the other person. And so that's the whole concept. So I think that, Mike, I was going and I was looking at our website, and, you were talking about how, why do we exist and why do we have this podcast? And you and I remember many years ago, we're thinking about what would be our tagline. And it says to educate and help people across the globe overcome addiction, realize their potential, and live life to its fullest. Mm-hmm. So it's not just living. It's not just stop drinking, not just don't pick up the drink. It's like we want to help the community live life to its fullest.
Yeah. That's really what it's about. People think that by not drinking or drugging, people that come into treatment, they feel like they're being punished. What do you mean I can't drink or drug? Why? And I've heard patients say that. It's not fair. It's not fair that those people over there can drink or use drugs. It's not fair to me. So it's like this, like they're in detention camp or something like that. That's not really what it is. We have this saying, and that is that in addiction, you give up everything to do one thing. In recovery, we give up one thing to be able to do everything. And when you stop drinking or drugging, then the world is opened up to you. Your talents, your potential, your horizons are expanded. You can now do things that you always wanted to do, but alcohol and drugs are holding you back. Because if you think about it, alcohol and drugs do not help you in any way. And we have other episodes where we talk about that, where people think that It makes them more creative. It makes them more relaxed. It helps with anxiety. It helps with sleep. It absolutely does none of those things. But that's another topic for another day. My point is that you give up the one thing that is destroying all of your hopes and dreams. And by not drinking and drugging, you then can live that fulfilled life and expand your horizons. And that's what we're about. I know in recovery myself, is that not been the case? If you think about it, we all have our life bucket list items that I want to do. Before I die, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. We have gotten to the point to where, particularly at our age, I'm getting to the point where most of the things that I've said early in my life that I wanted to do, at least attempt to do, kind of done. Last couple of years, actually, I've gone into the public realm and gone into the political world, unsuccessfully. But my point is that I was able to at least try it. The reason why I mention that is because I could have never even tried that if I was still drinking. And, you then can go through your life and say, I'm doing these things. I'm doing hard things that most people can't. And that's because I'm sober. If you are not sober, you're not going to do those things. Really, if you think of celebrities, even that you think of, those that drink and they drug, and, they... How does it end for most of them? How does it end?
Not well.
Not well at all. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say you can think of a few names, and I won't mention the names, but you can probably think of some off the top of your head and say, well, what about that guy? He's still alive. Look at him. He's like in his 80s now, and he does more drugs before breakfast than I've done in my whole life. I got news for you. My younger brother worked in the rock and roll industry, and I will tell you that without a doubt, much of what you see and what you think that these people get up and they're doing lines of cocaine and drinking all day and dropping acid, and you think that they're not doing that day in and out. They're not. A lot of that's an image that's been constructed because of the band or the type of genre of music they're into. Many of the people that you think are doing drugs and partying all night long and they're living into their 80s are not doing that. They're not doing that at all. And because I can tell you that person after person after person, and in fact, my brother working in that industry, the people that were doing that, many of them are dead right now. And those that aren't dead certainly aren't in that industry anymore. It just doesn't work if you're going to do hard things. It just isn't.
Good point.
Well, great book. And again, it's a book called Influencer, The New Science of Leading Change by Joseph Grenny and his colleagues. And it's something that's worth reading if you want to learn a little bit more. Lillie, give you about a minute here to go ahead and just kind of wrap up on the book, and you can give your encouragement to the listeners on this book.
Yeah, so this is just a book that I had stumbled on and read it, and I thought that there was a lot of applicability to everyone, especially to me, to Mike, whether or not you're in recovery or you're planning on running a race or anything that you want to be able to ensure your success in doing something that you have always wanted to do. And I think there's a lot of applicability to the book, so I would encourage you to read it, or if not read it, just those concepts. I Googled it and you could look at images, and there's a lot of people that have used it in many ways to apply to their lives. And so would like to be able to hear what other people have to say if they've read it, or if you've tried to use these concepts based on what we've talked about today. Mike and I would love to hear from you and see if it worked for you too. So happy to be here, Mike. I'm glad that we were able to bring this up as a topic. And so thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much, guys. And I want to thank Lillie for sharing that with us. Now, guys, looking out ahead, we're going to have a couple of people on as guests. Lillie and I are going to interview them. I'm going to have a guy named Andy Carrier who's going to be coming on from Valor Station. Valor Station is a treatment center in Georgia, and it's primarily for first responders. And he's going to come in and he's going to talk about Valor Station. He's going to talk about what prompted him to start that recovery center, or be a part of the start of that recovery center, that I should say, and the type of work that they're doing. They're pretty new, and they are really, really good at what they do, and he's going to talk about their concepts. And I'm also going to have a guy named, a good friend of mine, Steve Robeson, who I have met at a post-critical incident seminar out in Ohio, and he's going to be he's along with me an addiction specialist, and he talks about addiction primarily to first responders, but he'll share with us his story and the work that he is doing. So that's what we're going to be doing here in the future in the next couple of weeks. So get ready for that. You guys take care of yourselves. Get out there, get sober. You can do it, because recovery is possible, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Bye-bye. So as I always like to say, I do not represent any group, do not represent anyone other than myself. My only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me, and maybe it will help you too. If I've said something that does not apply to you, or you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to take any information that you can use for yourself and help others as well. That's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we hope to impart the knowledge we have gained to others as well. With that, please visit our Facebook page, Recovery is Possible, and our website, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let us know how we're doing, and let us know if there's any topic that you're interested in hearing about. We'd love to hear from you, and take care, and we'll see you next time.